Good evening, members. Good evening, everybody. And thank you all very much for joining us here tonight for our Wine Champions online tasting this evening. My name is Gil. I'm one of the event managers at the Wine Society. And I'm joined this evening by the person in charge of our Wine Champions, in the driving seat of our Wine Champions offer each year, by Matthew Horsley. So good evening, Matthew.
Hello.
Good evening. Welcome. Thanks for joining us. How are you?
Yeah, I'm okay. I've got a slight cold, so not ideal for blind tasting. But thankfully, I know what the wines are. So, of
Yes, but we must keep quiet about those, at least for now.
course. Yeah, of course. How are
So
you?
members over, sorry,
How are you?
I'm very well. I'm very well. Very much looking forward to the tasting, especially as I do know what the wines are. It makes the blind tasting all that much easier and less daunting for me,
Yeah, they're the
knowing
best
what
at
these
blind
wines
tasting when
are.
you know what the
But
wines
but a lot of fun. So members, over the course of this event, we will open the doors to Wine Champions HQ and show you behind the scenes of everything that goes on to create this. This is our current offer, the Wine Champions 2024. So we'll get some insights into what happens with the tastings, how the buyers approach each of those tasting days, and how the wines are categorized. Any discussions, debates that take place within those sessions as well that Matthew is able to share with us, his experiences and expertise. Also for tonight's event, we have created a very special tasting pack. And in true Wine Champion style, we are, as we've alluded to there, tasting these wines blind, just as the wines are tasted blind for Wine Champions themselves, although Matthew will explain in a slightly different way to the way that we'll be tasting them this evening.
Yeah.
But the idea is a bit of fun here and to go through the tasting notes, the aroma profiles and of these wines, describe what we're tasting, what's in the glass. And along the way, we'll give a few hints, a few clues, a few tips as to what these wines might be, where they might be from, what the grape varieties might be as well. Once we've finished the tasting, I'll just pop up a quick poll asking us all to pick A or B, so we have a 50-50 chance of of getting them right or what we think these wines are, and then we will reveal all by opening our sealed envelope that was in the pack.
Do I get to vote as well?
You can vote, I suppose. Yeah, why not? I'll vote as well. Members, we'd love, as always, to hear from yourselves. Please do use the chat feature here on Zoom. If you'd like to ask any questions, please use the Q&A button for those. If you've got the tasting packs, let us know what you think of the wines. Let us know your tasting notes. And if you're brave enough, if you're confident enough in your decision of what you think each wine was, please do declare it in the chat to us all, and we'll see how close we all get. But I think, without further ado, Matthew, shall we start by introducing Wine Champions itself, what it is, how
Yeah,
it's come to
sure.
be?
Yeah, so Wine Champions, I think, has been going on for about 24 years now, roughly 23 or 24. And originally, it was founded by Sebastian Payne, MW, who is the former head of buying and buyer at the Wine Society, who's been with us since 1973, I think, which is an insane amount of time. And he does still do some tastings with us for Wine Champs, which is always good fun. And he'll always say that actually he started it because as buying manager and having a few new buyers in the team back in the kind of 80s and 90s, he kind of used it as a way of keeping an eye on what buyers were buying and a good
Right.
way of kind of critiquing each other's wines and making sure that the standard across the range at the Wine Society was of a quality that is expected of the society. And after they started doing it, they were like, you know what, members would really benefit from knowing what we are saying about these wines and which ones we think are the best. And so they did what all reasonably savvy retailers did and put together an offer, and they published it to our members, which is fantastic. So all those wines that got X number of marks out of the available total were put into a Wine Champs offer, and they were made available to our membership. And so it's this totally mad thing where we are actively telling you of the 1,600 odd wines that we list at any one time on the website. Don't buy 1,500 of them.
Yeah.
Just buy these ones. These ones are the best, which is a slightly odd angle for a retailer, but it's fascinating. And yeah, I took over the running of it in 2017 than 2018 actually. So I think this was my certainly 6th or 7th time running it. I'm
Mhm.
very happy to say that this was actually my last year running it as well. So I've passed it on to Fiona, one of our new buyers, which I'm very relieved by, because as we'll see in a minute, it's quite a process, and it's one that you have been involved in the past as well.
Yes.
So yeah. Shall I keep going? Shall I keep talking about how things?
Again, well, I was going to say of those sort of 20 plus years, I mean, there must have been some elements of evolution in terms of how it's approached, but how is it now then for, say, 2024 this year? You mentioned 1,600 wines, but they're not all tasted together. They're not all tasted at once.
No, yeah. So as far as I'm aware, when it first started 20 years ago, they probably taste 100 wines. Because I imagine that we certainly didn't have quite as many wines available
Mhm.
for sale than we do now. And so as the range has got larger, the tastings have naturally got larger as well, and the membership's got larger, and so we've got kind of more mouths to feed. And so now we separate it into about 15 different tastings, which we do over an entire month. And it really is a month-long process, which is a hell of a lot of time to have all of your buyers kind of out of business for an entire month every year. Um, and we basically separate the tastings into style categories. And so we will know that we are tasting Chardonnay on one day. We will know that we are tasting Pinot Noir on another day. We know that we will be tasting Old World Rhone blends on one day, or Bordeaux blends from the New World. And so it gives us context, which is really important. Obviously, today we are doing totally blind, and so there is very little context.
Yes.
Or hopefully, the only context is that they are all winners, and so they are all of high quality, we believe. And in terms of being at the tastings, so we're aware that timescale wise, it's not easy to have all 8+ buyers there every day, and so we have a quorum of 5. So there needs to be at least 5 buyers at every tasting, and any buyer that has skin in the game in that tasting. For example, Marcel has to be at the Rhone tasting. It would be
Mhm.
senseless for him not to be at the Rhone tasting, for example. And so any buyer that has wines in that tasting will be included, and then we'll try and add others as well. So normally we have around 7 at any one tasting, which is great.
Mhm.
And we will taste roughly 70 wines in a session. Obviously, everything is blind. They are all in bags. We even remove the foil caps from the bottles as well, and including the screw cap sleeve as well,
Which is
which
no easy thing. Let me testify. Let
yeah,
me
I
testify.
mean, your
Yes.
hands by the end of it are covered in cuts from trying to remove the screw cap ones. We will leave them on if there's no obvious sign of what that wine is. So if there's no branding, or if there's no obvious color that might lead us to a particular wine, then we may leave it on just for ease. But otherwise, anything that could give that wine away is removed, which is pretty mad. Um, and so, yeah, we taste about 70 wines a day. We taste in silence, typically. There's sometimes a bit of joking and chatting, but we taste for 2 hours in silence, and we score each wine individually. And it's the most complicated scoring process in the world. If you think it's a wine champ, you give it a 2. If you like it but aren't quite sold on it, you give it a 1. And if you don't think it's a champ, then you just don't score it. It's a 0. And then after 2 hours, when everybody's tasted all the wines and everybody's given their scores, we convene again in the tasting room, and I've got a spreadsheet basically that I get everybody to read out their scores individually. And so it'll be, I gave number 10 a 2, 18 2, 21 1. And when everybody's done their scores, any wine basically has got a little formula that calculates any wine that gets at least 70% of available marks. So it takes into account how many people have been in the tasting. So if any wine gets 70% or above, then it's a wine champion. So what we'll do is we'll all give our scores. We'll then have our immediate champions. And then what we then do is any wine that scored between 50% and 69%. Still blind, we will taste those again and we'll discuss them as a group, because we feel that when you're tasting 70 wines, it's very possible for one of us to miss a wine, or it's very difficult to create any form of tasting order when the team are kind of putting the wine orders together. And so there may be a very oaky, high, very oaky, intense, rich, quite extracted red wine, followed by a slightly prettier, lighter, unoaked style that goes over a price bracket. And so that wine may, on first time, be overlooked, but it might have, really appealed to one of the buyers or enough buyers for it to warrant being tasted again in a more discussion panel.
Sure.
Speaking of prices, so we don't give exact prices, but we give a range, and so it'll be wines 1 to 15 will be sub £10, for example, and then it will be wines 16 to 20 are 10 to 15, and then up in basically price brackets, just to give us some context, because we want to be able to champion wines at the lower price end, because that's really the majority of wines that our members drink, and they are typically the ones that have the most resonance as well. When we're saying, of all of the sub £10 Chardonnays or Sauvignons that we've got, actually, these are the 2 or 3 that you should be buying, we think it's quite a good message. And so after that scoring process, we then have our champions. We then unveil what they are. We all celebrate or cry because our wine hasn't won. But the key thing is, it stops there. We don't go, oh my God, we don't have any wines under £10, or oh my God, the Sauvignon Blanc tasting, we don't have a single New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc winner. We just go, well, that's how it goes.
Yeah.
It is not a commercially run tasting. It is what wins, wins. And so there was a few years ago, where there was no New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which for an offer that goes out in July, August time is kind of retail suicide for most wine retailers. But it's amazing because you then get a really great overview, of the whole range that we're offering. If we're doing the Chardonnay tasting and actually find that the vast majority of our wines that we're selling are slightly reductive, lightly oaked, fresh, bright styles, then we know that we probably need to source something a bit richer, a bit fatter, a bit fuller, just for balance. It gives us a good idea about vintage trends. So in the Italian tasting, we taste basically all Italian reds together. It might give us a really clear idea of the successful vintages which are ready to drink now. Or for Bordeaux, for example, it might again give an idea of particularly impressive communes within the region, or again vintages. So it gives us an amazing idea of the range as a whole. So there is still that added benefit. It's not just so we can put an offer together. It's also so we can get a grasp of where our range is. And for a company to open about 1,000 wines, because we do taste about 1,000 wines over the 4-week period from our own stock, to then tell people don't buy 90% of them at the moment is it's quite a brave call. But it's good fun. It's not great on your teeth.
Yeah.
Apart from that, it's great.
Yeah. Some days that carry more acid tastings than others.
The sparkling tastings are they're
Yeah.
tough.
But I think you're talking lots about tasting wines, and thank you very much. They're obviously talking about the tasting, so I think it's time for us to prime our first tasting, our first wine. So members, if you have got the tasting packs, if you've not already primed your glass, please do so now. And whilst we do that, though, I've just got, because you were mentioning a lot of the sort of setup there, so I thought I'd share a few images. So this is the first. Hopefully, we can all see this.
Look,
my first question here is this pre or post the day's tasting?
Oh, you know what?
Remember?
I think this is pre-tasting. Either that or we were tasting white wines.
So that's your minimum of 5. So we've got 6 of you there for that particular day. But if I continue to share there's yourself. So this is the tasting room where it all takes place. But there you go, members. You can see this is before it all kicks off. But there they are, very much wrapped in branded packaging. But you can see maybe from there, as Matthew, as you were saying there, if it's a screw cap bottle, we also get rid of the entire screw cap, so the neck as well.
Yeah.
You can kind of see that from the second bottle in, possibly.
Yeah.
But we do remove that in there. So a few pictures there of the room itself and how that's laid out. But yeah, so hopefully we've all got wine one in our glass. Matthew, have you got yours?
I do.
I have mine here. So if we start by just having a smell of the wine, and let's discuss what we're getting in the glass and what we're getting on the palate.
Yeah.
I'll let you go first.
Oh, okay. So for me, looking at the wine, I know I've got slightly blurry, but it's quite golden, which might suggest there's some oxidative winemaking, whether that's in barrel or perhaps the wine has got some age to it, which is always good. I'm kind of thinking, oh, okay, I'm expecting more than just a fruity, fresh white wine, which is good.
And so you have that right from the beginning then in the tastings as well. That colour, as you say, leads you to a number of different potential outcomes, I suppose, for what the wine may be. But you're looking at it very much objectively of what the wine is.
Yeah. You'd hope that it isn't a New Zealand Sauvignon with this colour.
Yes.
And it smells quite ripe. There's definitely oak. There's definitely some kind of richness, some concentration. There's some complexity there. There's kind of almondy, buttery, nutty, pistachio, shelly. So there's lots of complexity, which is
very much.
We want wines that are complex. Why don't you do the palate? How about that?
Well, as you described there on the aromas, a lot of that complexity really comes across. It's very well structured. It's got a lovely depth, huge concentration. I love the kind of fruit profile in there, but that oak really shines through. So, as you mentioned, the nuttiness, more sort of like almost a hazelnuts. I'm looking at the wine in the glass there, but hazelnuts and butter and a little vanilla in there as well. So again, indicating, as you mentioned, oxidative and oak aging. But a lovely brightness, a lovely elegance on the finish as well. The acidity is rather high, so it keeps it very well balanced, nice and clean.
Yeah, and I think as buyers, we're all looking for maybe slightly different things. For me, I'm looking for balance and I'm looking for length. And for me, I spat the wine out a good 30 seconds to a minute ago, and I can still taste it, getting real length. That concentration on the palate. This is clearly quite a warm region. The alcohol is apparent, but I don't mind that. I think that's fine because it's adding almost a sweetness to the fruit as well, a kind of viscosity, which is really quite appealing. So I would like to think that I would be able to get this wine blind 9 times out of 10, personally.
Okay. This will be just we'll have to do a private or blind tasting then of this stuff, and we'll put that to the test.
Yeah.
But you can see there, certainly for me, you can see exactly why this is a wine that's crowned a champion. As you say, you're looking for that balance, and the complexity is there in spades, really. It's a very, very good wine. And lots of lovely hints you've thrown in there I quite like as well. Members of, I don't know if you've picked up on all of those, but the slightly warmer climate area, I think you mentioned there, and oxidative and oak. But yes, members, let us know if you're trying this wine, what you think of it. Maybe it's a wine that tastes very similar to one that you've had before that you know and love. Perhaps you're firmly set on what you think this wine is. But whilst we're tasting this, and before we go on to the second wine, there's a question that's come in here from Phil. That is there a wine when you come to do the tastings? Is there any one wine that's tasted in more than one category? Do any kind of span across categories?
No. Wines get tasted once, and that is it. So no wine gets a second chance, if that makes sense. The only time we may taste a wine again is because we do these tastings in kind of February, March time. It takes a while to A, put the offer together, and B, if we champion a wine from South Africa or South America, it's going to take 3 or 4 months for that wine to get here. And so that's why the offer's in July, but we have to taste at that time. And so if we taste a wine and it wins, and we'll look at the stock, and we might go, actually, we're not going to have enough stock for the offer in July, so we'll get a new vintage, and we will taste that wine alongside the winning vintage with a minimum of 5 buyers again, and we will then decide whether we think as a collective that that wine is still good enough. And so it's not like we just go on to the new vintage and just accept that as the champion. And again, if a wine goes out of stock on the champs and we've got the new vintage, we won't sub it in. We won't say, oh, there's a follow-on vintage. And so it is still thorough in that way, which is good.
Excellent. We have had one. How good's your poker face? Because we have had one guest come through here. Is it a South African wine?
No, it's not. But
that answers about your poker face.
I like your thinking.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
If it was a South African wine, I would definitely be buying it for the society. I think it's delicious.
Right. Should we move on then to the second? Actually, you mentioned and when you come to after the tasting has finished and you've given all your scores and your markings and you have those discussion points, and you kind of between you as buyers, there'll be some that have marked highly a wine and some that haven't, and you have these sort of open discussions a little bit on that part.
Yeah, we do, and sometimes it can get quite heated. We can get a little bit angry. We are known. We're very proud, and sometimes we're tasting these wines a lot throughout our day-to-day life, and so sometimes you can have a wine which you're like, well, I think I know what that is, and so there is sometimes a little bit of guessing, which is fun. It's always good to get wines because we're only human. We always try and think what it might be. It's hilarious when we get it totally wrong, but yeah, sometimes I'll absolutely love a wine and I'll be like, oh, come on, guys, this is unbelievable for potentially under £10. What don't you like about it? And we're pretty hard to budge, and I think Gil can testify to that. When we're in that situation, it takes quite a lot to change our minds.
It's fascinating to have been in the room, as you've mentioned there, for a couple of the years, which we'll go on to a couple of pictures, and when it momentarily changed the format, in terms of where you were tasting and how you were tasting over the pandemic and lockdown periods. But it was very fascinating insights just sitting in the room and watching those discussions. Watching the entirety really was a privilege to do. And yes, the occasional, once it's all finished, the occasional, I know exactly what that wine is, it's such and such, and it being not quite that wine on the guessing was always quite interesting and fun as well. But yes, okay, so we've got a member who's just asking, not getting many primary aromas on that wine, just before we move on to the second one. So how would you describe, so we've described the flavors there, as you say, those nutty, those oxidative, and the vanilla, the oaky characters are coming through. So it is very much secondary flavors and aromas that we're getting mainly.
Sometimes even some tertiary. For those that don't, because that's kind of quite a WSET term. So for primary aromas are very much fruit aromas, that what you'd expect from a young fruity wine, typically that hasn't had any severe winemaking done to it, such as oak aging or batonnage or all those sorts of things. And so you're getting a lot more of those secondary aromas, which are typically that winemaking influence, and tertiary, which I typically describe as those mature as the wine develops in time. So there is definitely age to this wine. And the tertiary aromas are getting that slightly walnutty, hazelnutty, that more dried apricot fruit, which often comes from maturation.
Excellent. So I think we'll move on to wine 2. So members, if you've got, I'm going to do this because I've got the bottle in my hand here. So I'm going to have to try and do this very carefully so as to not get that caught on screen. But we move on to wine 2. And again, the one thing we, of course, can say with all of these wines is the first 3 are white wines. Very much should be, to tell me if that's not the case.
No prizes there.
No prizes for that. And then the final 3 are red wines. But we've got
with these packets, you have to just get it all in your glass, because trying to stack them back up with some left in it is just I'm going full whack.
It's 100 mil, 100 mils measure there. So whether it's yourself or enough, possibly just about for a little tasting of this too.
It smells nice. Unsurprisingly.
Is that's it? We'll leave it there, shall we? It smells nice.
do you want to take the nose on this one, and I'll talk about the palate?
Yeah, yeah. So with this, instantly very, very different to the first wine. It's got a lot more, for me, there's a lot more of primary, so those kind of fruity characters
Yeah.
coming through on the nose there. There is a little bit of oak I'm getting, but it's nowhere near as pronounced as that first wine. It's a lot more of a subtle oakage and little hints of a nuttiness as well, but very much that citrus, some lovely green fruit, some green apple, and maybe a little bit of that sort of fleshy stone fruit slightly coming through as well.
Yeah.
But again, very complex, but in a completely kind of different avenue and different direction from the previous wine, but huge complexity here as well.
Yeah, I think they share similarities. As you say, there's definitely oak. They share that kind of weight on the palate. They share a decent lick of alcohol. But I think this one just has a bit more acid.
Mm.
Um, it's probably somewhere. I'm trying to describe why I think it's like this. I think it's definitely a warm area, but it seems like there is some sort of cooling influence. There is acid there. There is freshness. There's some reductive smoky notes on the nose, and that palate is rich. It's textured. There, as I said, there is oak, and it's still not that primary. There's more primary fruit. There's kind of a bit more citrus and melon.
Mm.
Um, I again, I think I would be very confident on the grape for this, but I would be less confident on where it was from.
Hmm.
Were I to be judging it blind in an exam, for example.
Yeah, yeah. Our members, I say, let us know what you're thinking of the wine. Give us your tasting notes where you think this might hail from, or the grape variety.
Yeah,
It is a style in the glass here. Those primary characteristics, those fruit characters that you mentioned, citrus and melon, are very typical of this variety. I mean, they are sort of, I suppose, typical of a number, but when you put that
yeah,
together with oak and
yeah.
with the kind of aging
And
potential.
in the tasting that this would have been in, this would probably been in like the sub 15
Mm.
bit. And I think for this grape variety, when you've got really well managed oak, and there's probably a bit of new oak here as well, which is giving it that kind of little extra step up in quality. When you've got that leesy, weighty character, and you're getting all of those with balance and freshness and length at that sort of price, then that kind of is the sort of thing that makes us as buyers and as judges in wine champs go, "Ooh, this is ticking a lot of boxes right
Mm.
now." And it's just whether it all kind of comes together for all of us.
Just looking at a few of the comments on the chat as well, and I'll get to the Q&A because I can see a number of questions in there as well. But we have one member mentioning that this wine two, is a little less harsh at the end compared to number one.
Mhm.
Actually mentioned as well there that his isn't chilled, but imagine that would enhance it very nice. But actually that brings on to a point in terms of the temperature that you taste these wines when you're
Yeah.
tasting, because you don't taste these chilled; they are at room temperature or tasting room temperature.
Well, yeah, our tasting room for certainly the new buyers, Fiona, Harriet, and Victoria, have begun to realise that you need to bring a jumper when you even in the middle of summer, because
For
our
any
tasting
prolonged length of time,
yeah,
yes.
our tasting was set to about 16 degrees at all times, because we keep a lot of wine in there that samples which need to be kept at a fairly constant temperature that may be in that room for a few weeks, as we want
Mhm.
to make sure that they're at reasonable temperature. And so the whites are probably perfect temperature. The reds may be a little bit on the chilly side, but what we'll do if we're tasting reds, we'll probably just turn the aircon off and let that wine come up to temperature a bit more. And what we do find, and I think certainly with this wine and the previous, often when we are doing those retasting bits, if a wine doesn't quite make it to a champ, when we taste them again, they actually come out of the glass even more and are even more impressive because of the oxygen in their wine making. They can also benefit from oxygen in the bottle. So having them open for a couple of hours or having like half bottle ullage on them for half an hour does help. And so that kind of pacing through again can really be beneficial. And where we do that for any of the wines, if we do find that it's improved, we'll often put it in the note in the offer saying decant, because we found that it got better after an hour or so.
Yes. Amazing. We've had one comment there as well, that lots of butter in that wine.
Yeah.
It's certainly a
Yeah,
comment there, which
definitely lots of, mallow, batonnage, stirring, that sort of thing.
And for me, that comes through an awful lot more on the palate than it does on the nose. I mean, as it's warming a little bit in the glass, that's coming out more. But definitely on the palate, I'm getting that, and a thoroughly enjoyable wine.
Yeah.
But I think let's complete the trilogy of white wines. I think that we go straight into wine 3, and then we can perhaps expand a little bit on what I mentioned in terms of that slight change of way that the wines were tasted and the way that we set up. With a couple of images to kind of show that. But let's taste this third wine first.
Yep.
Whilst we're pouring as well, again, another note here from Mike saying, I tasted number 1 after number 2, and the oak really comes out much more going that way.
On wine 1, yeah.
Wine 1 after 2, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, they are both oaky wines, and I hold no problem saying that I like oak, and when it's done well, oh yeah,
yes,
it's really nice. Right.
So here we go. Wine 3. I'm going to take the aromas. We'll alternate.
Yeah. So less oak. It's maybe a little bit mean tasting this one after the last 2. But that's that may well have been how it was in the tastings, and so it's a lot brighter in the glass. I am getting some more primary fruit here, that kind of quincy, melony, but there's also a kind of leesy, bready character on the nose, which is quite nice. I think there probably is some oak, but it'll be very old oak, and we'll probably see on the palate with oak, it impacts the texture as well as the flavor. And so when it's old oak, hopefully there isn't too much flavor interruption, but the palate should broaden because of the oxygen ingress during maturation. And so I'm hoping that this should be quite a broad style on the palate, but on the nose it's quite quiet. It's probably one of those wines that will smell and go, oh, that smells elegant, but it's not screaming at you. And so yeah, let's have a taste.
I think as you're describing the aroma and what it might be on the palate, you've actually absolutely nailed it. Hit that nail on the head there. It has a wonderful texture. It's wonderfully broad, and a huge amount again of concentration, complexity, less of the oak, or certainly new oak character, indicating, yes, as you say, an older oak vessel being used. And we've got a couple of comments here about a lot more grip on the palate, skin contact possibly.
Yeah.
And then you mentioned, and a shout out for mentioning quince as well.
Well, yeah, I'm quite simple with my tasting notes. I'm not the greatest orator when it comes to plethora of flavors, and so but quince I do get in that.
Yeah.
But I think that if there is any oak in this one, I certainly don't taste any. It's just whether the texture there, but that may be more because of lees. But what I do get from this wine, I think you're right. There is some grippy, slight phenolic character to that, which I think is really nice. I think often when it's done well, it kind of carries the fruit longer on the palate. Someone's got something for the fruit to hold on to. And I do find this wine really kind of builds volume and flavor on the finish, which I think is always a really good quality in a wine. I think if a wine does fall apart a bit or doesn't build, then I can be a bit disappointed. But this I really think has got proper length.
Absolutely, and something that again we've had comment here, and I completely agree. It has very good length. I'm still getting lots of that flavor, lots of the characteristics of that wine.
Yeah,
well past a minute after spitting that. So yeah, it is, as you mentioned there on the nose. It's a little bit more delicate than the previous 2. So perhaps tasting it the other way around would be quite an interesting experiment as well. But it doesn't lack anything on that palate. It's got a huge amount of character and complexity and richness.
Yeah, I think
wonderful texture.
qualitatively, I think this is arguably the finest of the three. I think it's very elegant, but it's got muscle behind it as well. It's that old kind of fist in a velvet glove sort of comment. It's got power, but it like applies it slowly.
Mm,
It's not a punch like the previous two. It's more of a push like that.
yeah,
Probably makes
yeah.
no sense, but to me that makes sense.
I think I know what you mean.
Yeah.
Yes, Ewan's put here. Wine three is really lazy.
Mm.
Again, as you alluded.
Ladies
So
being easy.
definite winemaker,
Yeah.
impact from winemaking going on here. Those
Yeah.
secondary characteristics,
Yeah. I get
which again is an indication possibly of the grape variety, or certainly this variety lends itself well to a number of different winemaking options that we're seeing in that wine.
Yeah. I get twiglets
Okay,
at Marmite.
yeah.
Yeasty, but I love twiglets. So if I could, you know, if all wine tastes like twiglets, I'd be very happy.
Okay.
Let's move on.
Yes, that's an interesting one there. I've never paired actually a wine with twiglets. That might have to be something that I
Yeah,
do of another time.
I love them.
Before we move on to the red wines, then, shall we just talk for a few moments on? We were mentioning this just before we came on air, whether it was 1 year or 2 years, where the tastings weren't taking place in the tasting room, but actually we went into the members' room instead
Yeah.
for good reason.
Yeah, God, don't take me back, but it was an interesting interlude. Yeah, so it was so we're going to have to talk about COVID. I was hoping never to really talk about it, but in 2020 we'd literally just finished the tasting process when kind of lockdown hit, and so 2020 we were okay. But 2021, obviously, there were still measures in place, and for the safety of us as buyers and the wider kind of departments as well, when you're spitting wine in what is a fairly small tasting room with 8 people in there, it wasn't the smartest thing. And so we moved to the members' room, where there's much more space. I'm sure there's a few people who are watching this who have been to the members' room. And I called on the fantastic tastings team, of which Gil and Catherine were primary in that. And basically, we worked it that each buyer had their own table, and it had the full kind of glass screens and all of those. And each buyer basically had 12 glasses in front of them. And Gil and Catherine poured the wine for us, with face masks on and all of that, and full kind of PPE gear. We had our own spittoons. We were responsible for our own glasses, our own spittoons, and we did that 2 years in a row, which was fantastic for me because we got to spend basically 2 hours sitting down having wine brought to us. It was brilliant. But I think it was really good because it allowed us to really focus and hone in. And I think you will see from previous, I think we got more winners as a result. And this isn't about getting as many winners as possible.
Yeah.
We actually find that the most successful wine champs in terms of the offer are the ones with fewer wines in there, because I think sometimes you can just confuse people again. You're taking a massive range of wines and then making an equally massive offer, whereas which yes we wanted to be positive, and I think lots of wines shone out, but I think it was mainly because we were just having a bit more focus. But in the tasting room, I think it's the much more fun way to do it. It's much more sociable, and we are so strict, and I can't tell you how strict we are. If a wine gets 69.5%, it ain't winning. It's not there. So anyway, yeah. But you've got some pictures.
I do have a couple of pictures actually. Let me get those up.
Because you're in one of them, I think.
I am in one, which I wasn't going to show there, but as you've just mentioned it, I suppose I should. But a couple of pictures here just of those tastings. So yeah, you pay no attention to the individual lining the different banks of wines up. But one thing, actually looking at these, and I'll show the next slide as well. One of my main takeaways was, as we're tasting in various flights, as you've alluded to and mentioned there, the different flights within each tasting, it was quickly noticeable the speeds at which each of you as buyers taste.
Yeah.
Some of you taste, I mean, none of you obviously very much taking time, but each of you have your different processes, and some of you taste a bit quicker than others. and others might retaste and ponder over the wines a little bit. So for Catherine and myself, it was very much one of the huge challenges for us was keeping on top of who's at what wine.
Yeah.
Where is everybody at? Everyone's on a different flight, so that was a challenge, but one that I think we managed, we overcame. But it was thoroughly insightful for me to be part of that. It was eye opening to watch it all take place and fascinating to see it all happen and those discussions and debates. And yeah, you were very strict as well,
Yeah. Yeah.
as you need to be, as you say.
Yeah. We do, as buyers, we do a decent amount of other judging as well, just because it's a good thing to do, because it helps us build an idea of the wider market, and it's good for gossiping. And we are really strict, and I do find that us compared to other buyers or writers or anything, that we are pretty hard arse a lot of the time,
Yeah.
which is good. Which is good. That's what we've got to be.
We've had a question here as well from Richard asking, how detailed are the notes? I suppose it depends on the buyer as well. Some of you will make more detailed notes than others, but
Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. I won't name them, but yeah, you look at some of the notes on some of the buyer's sheets and it is pretty brief. Like one word answers, like nice, rubbish, gorgeous, yada yada
Mhm.
yada. Some take a bit more notes, typically me, because I'm often the one that will provide a lot of the notes for the actual copy. But what we do when we're doing the kind of nattering, doing scores, a couple of members from the marketing and content team join in for that, and so they write down our verbal comments as well, and so they can get a full idea of what we really think about the wines, and they will be writing down. They'll basically be writing the wine notes for us
Mhm.
in that room, listening to what we're saying about the wines, and they'll taste them with us, obviously before we reveal what they are, so that they can get an idea as to the flavors and yeah, and we'll talk about it and say, look, for me this is a champ because it's got amazing concentration, it's got great character, yada yada yada, or vice versa. For me, it's a bit thin, oak's a bit too prominent, it's not a champ. That's
Yeah.
it. So they've got to have the wow factor. Champs have got to be above and beyond the others.
Mhm. And
Um,
are there wines? So you've got the red in your glass there, but before that, just one more question before that, if I may. Are are there any wines, and obviously the vintage will change, but are there any that are sort of back-to-back winners or multiple winners? Just
yeah,
that consistency of style between vintages and
yeah, yeah. There are a few which do seem to win every year. Um, the ones that come to mind, we're not tasting them today, which is fine. Like the Society's Carver
Mhm.
wins basically every year because it is unbelievably good value,
Mhm.
and we don't really have many, if any, under £10 traditional method sparkling wines, and so it just stands worlds apart from really anything else, and so that very often wins. The Society's Champagne comes
Yeah.
out a lot. It might be because we have Society palate and we just love that style, but also because there is oak fermentation on the primary fermentation with the Society's Champagne, it does stand out. And it's not a case of, I think that's the Society's Champagne, so I'll give it a mark. It's, wow, this has got added complexity. There is real complexity. And, when you're tasting lots of very nice, but typically primary, yeasty, refreshing, bright champagnes, and then you get to the Society Champagne and there is oak, there's age, there's that rapier acidity from the no mallow, you're
Mhm.
suddenly like, whoa, it's like a bolt. And
Yeah.
so it's very hard not to give it a mark. So
Yeah.
yeah. What
Excellent.
else? I'm trying to think of reds that win every year. It's the exhibition Rioja,
Hmm.
because it's a traditional style that we love,
Yeah.
uh, as buyers. All that oak, all that lovely age, and again, it just stands out.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. Well, as you've got wine four in your glass there,
Mm.
let's move on to the red wines.
Yeah,
So we'll pour wine four,
yeah,
first of our reds. So you've just smelled that wine. You've check the aromas and the tasting there. What jumps out at you immediately?
I mean, I love it.
Yep.
I would. This is another one which I would feel pretty confident about getting in a blind tasting.
Hmm.
Um, but I'm immediately getting lovely ripe blackcurrant.
Yeah.
Definitely getting some minty eucalypt, which will definitely put people on the right lines.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm getting sweet tannins. I'm getting nice full body. I'm getting really bright acid. I'm getting a little bit of oak, and I'm just getting plush, sexy, just yum. Like it just makes me
Yeah.
want to drink it. And I will happily say that it's not a style of wine that I buy very often for me personally to drink, but I think this is really very good.
Yeah. There's one word that you mentioned there, and may well have featured on on a buyer's tasting note for this, but yum is absolutely the right word for it.
Oh, did it?
Jumps out of the glass. Those characters are just it's very open, very expressive,
Yeah, and I think it's very of its
delicious.
type. Like
Yes.
I'm somebody that when I'm blind tasting, I if I can pick what that wine is with confidence, it always nudges me more towards giving it a good mark because it screams of its place, its typicity.
Yeah.
Um, it's not a it doesn't have to be like that, but I
Mm.
always think that this person has clearly done this wine well and kind of true to its origin,
Yeah.
which is always good. Sorry, I'm very warm. I'm going to take this off.
No problem. It does have great definition. Um, yes. Well, I say you have given potentially a huge clue as to where it might come from with one of
Yeah,
those little
yeah.
tasting notes in there, but that's absolutely fine.
Yeah. But again, I
Um,
think it's it's one of those things that it can be a negative.
yep.
That eucalypt character, it can be excessive, it can be green, it can give an idea of unripeness. But in styles like this done well, it adds real sense of place and complexity, and I
Yeah.
like that.
And that's something actually that carries a lot of different wines. In here, perhaps that eucalypt, but others you have that kind of bell pepper,
Yep.
those sorts of green characteristics. The capsicum, exactly. I'm thinking Cabernet Franc for as a varietal that has that. Um, they can often be seen as a fault or seen negatively by some, but I love those elements if they're done well within. If there's balance, and that's not the kind of overriding character.
Yeah,
But I love a little bit of that just to add some complexity and depth to the wine.
yeah. A good comment there. Sorry, that's just popped up about what
Yeah.
maybe we would eat with these
Mm.
wines. You know me, I'm not very good at food and wine matching. So if you want to, from the tastings side of things, if you wanted to take those, maybe that would take a weight off my back.
Oh, you've thrown me there. I mean, what I might do actually is I in an email tomorrow I might well send through some ideas, some
That's a nice
options.
idea. That's a nice idea.
Putting me on the absolute spot there. Although maybe towards the end I'll come up with a couple as well. But definitely love a good food and wine pairing. So I'll come up with some ideas and
Yeah.
pop that in an email for you all tomorrow.
Right.
Amazing. Right.
What's the next one?
Let's go on to wine 5.
Right. Oops. Mine's in a different packaging, so but those who have got it, don't worry. It's all legit. This is a blind box.
Yes.
Doesn't even have wine society branding on it, so we're doing blind tasting for real. For
Yeah,
realsy.
so apologies that wines 5 and 6 have come in unbranded, but as Matthew says, they are legit. They are the wines 5 and 6.
My sachet still has wine society on it,
Yes.
so you can tell it's not from another reputable wine company.
Well, this wine, as you're getting the pouch there together, it completely different to the first, or wine 4, the first of the reds. The color immediately actually already
Yeah.
is strikingly different. I don't know if that comes through on the screen there, members, but this has a little bit more indication of age perhaps on the color.
Yeah.
And certainly a lot less of that real vibrant fresh fruit primary. There is fruit definitely there, but a lot more secondary and some tertiary notes coming through. So those winemaking styles and a bit of age.
Yeah, yeah. For me, there is one very distinctive character for this, which instantly would take me to a particular country, which is very, very high acid.
Yeah.
I mean, it is mouth-watering.
Yeah.
And that kind of brick color to the wine as well may also take me in certain directions. Again, just to reiterate, when we're tasting in champs, we're not trying to guess what the wines are. It's purely about quality, but it's always nice to do that. And I hadn't actually looked at what this wine is, but I'm hoping it's what I think it is.
But
But yeah,
this one you can vote for then if you've not
yeah,
looked ahead.
it is acid and it is tannin,
Yeah.
but the tannin is really well managed. It's kind of, it's almost kind of dusty, chalky tannins that really do go all over the palate. And when I was smelling it, I was like, "Ooh, I'm not too sure what I know what this is." And I tasted it instantly. I was like, "Oh, okay, here we are.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I know." And I think it's gorgeous, you know. And sometimes that acid, which is very high, can be off-putting. But I think in context with this particular tasting, I think it's something that you are expecting, and is really wines from this area without that acid are dead. You know, they're
Yeah.
A, fairly impossible, but B, no good.
And that structure, that high acidity, the tannins that and the concentration here
Hmm.
hint at this with it having a bit of a life to go. This can age
Yeah,
quite nicely and
yeah, I
develop a
think
lot
so.
more.
I think there is definitely a bit of age already, but I think it will get better.
Yeah.
And so yeah. Okay. I'm quite conscious of time, and so
Yes, yeah, yep. So we can pour wine six here. As we do that, though, we've got a little question from a member who just missed the beginning there. So just to recap on how price is factored in when you're doing these tastings.
yeah, so we almost do it in price bands. So we're like sub £10, then it'll be 10 to 15, 15 to 20. Because we do feel members, some people will never buy a wine over £10. And so it's very unhelpful for us to blind taste wines from sub £15, because we do think there are very specific price barriers that some people just do not go over or under. And so we do taste in those brackets to make sure that we are giving the wines a proper bit of context. And we'll try and create bands so that there are multiple wines within said band. And so there'll be 10 wines under £10, and there'll be 5 wines between 10 and 15, that sort of thing. So it's rare, if ever, that we'll have a wine only in one particular price band. But if we do, it might be like £50 plus one wine.
Mhm.
Just because I think when you're spending £50 on a bottle of wine, you're probably happy to spend 80. Whereas if you spend £9 on a bottle of wine, you're probably unlikely to spend £14.95, for example.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, you will.
We've had a comment here that just says purple, but I'm assuming that's because you've poured wine 6 in your glass. Because I'm definitely getting I'm definitely getting a purple hue and a little tinge
Okay,
there on the
I've
rim.
not opened that one yet. Again, I don't actually know what that one is either. So I'm looking forward to. I've not scrolled that far down on my sheet, so I'm.
Well, yeah, it definitely has a much more youthful color to it with that purple. I'm not sure if it's coming through my weird shaped glass I'm using this evening.
When I think purple, I think of one grape variety.
Yes, I think of the same one, perhaps. But on the nose, well, what do you think here? We've got number 6 smells amazing, really grippy tanning. These are some of the comments that are coming through already.
Ooh, okay. That might not be what I think it was, or thought it was. Oh, that smells good. Yeah, leather. I agree.
Yep.
Hmm. Mm.
Definitely has that grippy tannin.
Mm.
Lots.
I've run out of wine in my. I've run out of space in my spittoon, so I'm having to drink it. Okay, I'm fairly comfortable with what that is. Yeah, yeah.
So
Okay,
yeah, leather smells amazing. Leather, thick skin options. So perhaps a variety that's got a thicker skin
maybe.
that
Yeah,
gives us that color, gives us some of that tannin. Certainly a very well structured wine.
yeah. It's I would say it's a very classic
Mm-hmm.
style, which may allude to a certain hemisphere, or but yeah, it's
Continents,
got
yes.
it's very dry as well, which I suppose kind of characterize this area, at least the area that I think it is.
Mm-hmm.
It's got great perfume. I'm just going to actually look what the wine is before I go to a whole. Okay, okay, good. Yeah, okay, I'm happy. It's got lovely perfume, but there is definitely that leather, that cigar box, maybe something which
Yes.
takes people to certain areas.
Yeah.
And the palate, there is high acid, there is drying tannins, but not to a detrimental extent. But it definitely finishes bone dry. It's fairly moderate in alcohol. It's got really good body. It's got this silky plush kind of cassis fruit, um, and
Yeah.
it's really I will drink this very happily. I'm delighted there's no more room in my spittoon.
Yes, that's already been mentioned there. That a great excuse to be remembered for next time, perhaps. Yes. Quite a nice wine to finish on there. I mean, all six of these wines have been absolutely beautiful. I can see why they've been crowned champions, is what I'm trying to
Yeah,
say.
yeah.
But
Well, I
a
think
wonderful wine to finish on.
interestingly, without giving what the wine this last wine away is, we had two vintages of this wine win
Yep.
in champs this year, and they weren't next to each other or anything. They were at least 3 or 4 wines apart, and both of them came out easily, which is always a great sign.
Mhm.
We don't normally put multiple vintages of the same wine in a tasting, but if we've got enough stock, there's no reason not to, I suppose. Um, and this is, now I know the prices, but this is definitely a step up on basically any other wine in this tasting, I would say. Um, sorry, yeah, it's very very smart.
Amazing. Right. So we've tasted all six. We've talked about what goes on in the tasting room, the discussions, the scoring, the number of wines, just the sheer scale of this over so many weeks. I am now going to attempt to share a poll, which I've put together here. I'll launch this. Let's see if it works, members, and we can. So as I say, there's an option A or B. I thought I'd be kind and just have a 50-50 option rather than A, B, C, or D here.
Yeah,
But
yeah, smart.
put in there what you think each of these six wines are, and then we will unveil the identities. Let me see if I've got this. So is that coming up? You tell
Yeah,
me,
I
Matthew.
can see that.
Yep. So, well, there we go. I can't, of course, as I've created the poll. I can't answer any of these questions. So
I,
I'll
I'll vote as well.
you can vote for
I,
yours,
I,
and then
I
perhaps.
won't. I won't actually.
um, but members, if you want to vote there for your favorite, for your what you think each of these six wines were, we'll leave that up on the screen for a little bit longer. But Matthew, I wondered if there's anything before we unveil and reveal the identities of these wines, anything
Yeah.
more that you want to mention about the wine champions that we haven't already discussed?
Oh, you put me on the spot there.
I did, Rob.
I think the key thing for us, as when we're doing wine champions, the most important thing is that the wines are champions because they are for drinking now. That's not to say they won't develop further, but they've got to be good now, ready to drink. And I think all of these wines are, without exception. The last wine will definitely change and improve potentially, but it is still super good now. I'm someone that likes wine with fruit. It is made of fruit, and so if it doesn't taste like fruit, I'm a bit. And so there's still plenty of fruit left on this final wine. There's loads of development as well, but it's not dried out.
Mhm.
And so that is something we do that we really do take into consideration. If a wine is too tannic, or it's just too primary, or it's too savoury, if it's gone the other way, if it's too developed, then it can't be champed, because we want people to have the offer and buy them and drink them, now. or certainly this year, because that's when we think they're really at their most enjoyable.
Yeah.
And I do genuinely keep all of my notes from every session every year, and it does genuinely dictate what I buy for my own drinking for the
Yeah.
rest of the year every time. And I'm off to a friend's house on Saturday who's getting married in a few months' time, and he's asked me to put together a tasting, and we'll taste together, and he
Yeah.
can choose his wedding wines, and almost all of them are wine champions. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Brilliant. Brilliant. I can say as well, we've had a question here. Yes, the poll is anonymous, I believe. So don't, it won't declare what each of us have put together, but we've got almost 3/4 of voting in. So we can end, should we end the poll now and see what the results are as it is now? Or I'll give it
Turns
a
out
few more seconds for those of you who haven't and want to.
it turns out I can't vote anyway.
No,
Host
as
host of
panelists,
panelists
we're not
cannot
allowed.
vote, which
Yes.
I think's fair. Otherwise, I would, you know, I'd be navel gazing.
Let us end the poll now, members, if that's all right. Let's see what the results are. As this is on, do I share the results? Can you see the results yet?
Nope.
No, let me share these results. There we go. You can
Oh,
see.
there we go.
And if you've got the packs in front of you, members, you can unveil now. You can reveal what the answers are. They're all in that sealed envelope, but we've got 80% of those that voted for wine one said it was white Rioja, 20% said Austrian Grüner Veltliner. Matthew, which one was it?
Yeah, well done for those who said white Rioja. Yeah, it's a fairly classic style of white Rioja. For those that said Austrian Gruner, not a problem. You know, certainly like a Smaragd style from the Wachau, where you are getting a bit of oak and a bit of development. You know, it's not a bad way to go.
I'll just pop up here. I'm not sure if actually this is now conflicting with the poll results, but the wine itself, is that conflicting? Should I take that down?
No,
Or
you
can we
can
see
you can
both?
move the pot you can move the poll around. So I'm hovering it over our faces, which I highly encourage people to do because it's
So
far
this
more
was
fun.
yeah. So this is our first wine. I'll give some details about these wines as well in tomorrow's email there. But yes, El Pacto Blanco Rioja 2022.
Yeah,
So we did actually, when we were talking about this wine, say that it might have a little bit of age to it,
yeah, but it doesn't.
but it doesn't.
That's how much we know.
There we are. Second wine, let's have a look here. So wine number two, we've got 83% went for New Zealand Chardonnay, 18% for Alsace Riesling.
Not sure how that maths works, but yeah, fine.
Yes.
But
That wasn't me. I've read it off the screen.
yeah,
And again, yes, the majority of you there, 83% are correct. The New Zealand Chardonnay is
yeah,
the right answer.
yeah,
I'll quickly share that wine as well. So this was our exhibition Hawke's Bay Chardonnay.
yeah.
Um,
Which is fantastic. You know, I would never have gone to Hawke's Bay if I was in a blind tasting
mm,
exam. I would never think Hawke's Bay. I may have thought New Zealand or Australia, but Hawke's Bay is a fairly niche area for Chardonnay. But Alsace Riesling, fine. It's probably a bit oaky for Alsace Riesling, but acid was there definitely.
mhm. Third, and this was a little bit closer. So for wine three, we've got 58% saying South African Chenin,
Mhm.
42% saying white Burgundy.
Yeah, well, as South African buyer, I'm delighted by that because it shows that South African wine is of extremely high quality, but it is in fact white Burgundy for the number three. So I think it's a Macon.
It is indeed. Bear with me a
Am I
moment. I'll
right? Yeah.
share the screen. There we are. Domaine Gronals Macon.
Yeah. So certainly, you know, southern Burgundian, warmer climate, texture. You know, South African Chenin Blanc, I think, is a really good alternative. You know, the acid was maybe a bit low for that, but that texture was definitely there. So I don't think that's a bad shout at all. That's definitely the meanest of the poll
Yes.
ones, I think.
Well, there's one in there then. One mean one. Then onto the red wines. Wine number four. This one that definitely had that yum factor. Australian Cabernet Merlot blend or Rhone Valley Syrah. 78% saying Australian Cab and Merlot, and they are
Yeah,
correct.
yeah, very good. Yeah, again, Australian Cab Merlot. Yeah, that eucalypt is very very Australian. Um,
Yeah.
it is a fairly classic character. But I regularly got Australian Cab Merlot and Australian Shiraz confused in blind tastings, and so going Syrah is not a million miles away. I wouldn't worry.
No. Wine number 5.
This
Again, possibly a little of a tougher one.
this is also mean. Yeah, this is also mean. But
Chianti Classico or Zinamavro?
yeah, I
Oh,
think
yeah, sorry. That's a good question. Sorry, Matthew. Julia's asked
yeah, good question. Yeah.
which Cab Merlot. So let me bring that quickly on the screen. Let me get to the right point. There we are. Yes, so it's the Generation Series, actually. So another of our own label.
Oh, look at those reviews. People love it. Yeah. But
Yes,
hey, it shows that we all like different things.
indeed.
You know. But yeah, certainly the Chianti and Zinamavro one is also quite mean, and again, probably having the Greek buyer on here may have put people towards Zinamavro, but it was Chianti Classico.
And I'll continue sharing the screen
But
because actually it's another Generation Series.
the
Chianti
Chianti,
Classico 20.
yeah. I mean, yeah, I'm in the process of doing my MW dissertation on Zinamavro and looking at alternative kind of crossover grapes, and Chianti is definitely a style which is similar to Zinamavro. Pale, high acid, lots of tannin, and so it's a very similar style. So don't worry.
But members, if you liked Wine 5 with Chianti Classico, Zinamavro is definitely a varietal to seek out and try.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the final wine number 6. 83% of you said Left Bank Bordeaux. 17% said Chilean Pinot Noir. Matthew, the answer, the one, did you get this one right? Because you didn't know.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I may not have thought Margot, but yeah, it was Left Bank Claret. So I think this is the Exhibition Margot.
It is, yes, the 2019.
Yeah. Again, not great reviews, but it shows that people like different things, which is absolutely fine. But yeah, this is for me fairly classic Left Bank. Chilean Pinot, maybe just a bit pale, maybe a bit less tannic, but an equally delicious style of wine, I'm sure.
It certainly has that high acidity, but it's those tannins maybe they're a little bit lower.
Yeah. But I think quite a fun tasting. I love
Yes.
tasting blind. I love it. It's so much fun, and it's quite humbling as well, which is always fun. Which
Members,
you know me. I need a good humbling every now and again.
No, it's been great fun. It's been wonderful to taste all these wines, really, to taste them blind. Members, it's been fantastic to be on Zoom and with this session this evening. I hope you've all had a great evening as well. Those of you who've tasted the wines in the pack, and those without, maybe some of these wines have piqued your interest, and you'll thumb through the Wine Champions offer and see if there's any other wines that may be of interest. But I think at this point we can say goodbye. Phil, have a great evening. Matthew, thank you for your time.
Yeah, no problem. My pleasure.
Tonight.
What better way to spend a Thursday night than drinking free wine?
Absolutely.
Wine, full stop.
A wine, full stop. Members, thank you all very much as well. I think our next online event will be in August. I think August 16th, which is another tasting pack event actually to celebrate International Pinot Noir Day. So those aren't tasted blind; they very much will be known and revealed, and all Pinot Noir. But whether we'll see you at that or another event, have a great evening, great rest of the week. See you all soon.
Bye, everybody.